Hello, it's Dave Hawkins again, getting ready to start up another stream for you. Hope you have had a good Friday night and a happy Friday at that, and a good Saturday morning. And if today were a typical Saturday morning and we were all, or at least I was a little kid, I'd be sitting there watching cartoons right now, doing my best to catch up with Hanna-Barbera and all of the all of the great shows that I used to watch when I was growing up. And I'd be looking forward to this afternoon when we would have the Creature double feature, and ideally a perfect day would include a Godzilla movie. So I don't know about you, but that's how I used to plan out my Saturday mornings. But now I actually find myself enjoying getting up and perusing some news, identifying some good stories that might be worth telling, and looking at what kind of things are going on out there in the world that I might share with you. So that said, I'm going to get right into today's news a little bit. First and foremost, when you look at the stock market, it's a mix of red and green, so we're not, I would say if you're heavily invested in anything red, you probably aren't feeling as cheerful as you might. But for those of you who are invested in some green stuff, yay, right? So anyways, we'll always have some kind of hopes one way or the other for our finances. At some point, maybe according to Elon in the future, it'll be a super abundant future and we'll have no need to worry because all of the bills will be paid by AI and robots and so on. Who knows? But until then, we still have to make a living, put a little bread on the table, and do what we can to figure out how to enjoy our Friday and Saturday nights. So, for those of you who are working 5 days a week and whatnot. So, that said, I would have to say that, for me, looking at my outlook with the way the world has gone, I've things have gone pretty well in my life, mostly because I made choices, right? Early choices to do things that were positive. But it always comes down to, I always make decisions based on, will I be happy? Will I look back and say thank you to the person who made that decision in the future? So that's led to a series of good decisions in life that make me feel like I can actually sit here with you on every day at 11 a.m. and talk about fun things, interesting things, and see where it goes. So I don't have, as I said, I'm not going to do the Scott Adams litany, even though I could, just grab a cup or a mug, a glass, a tankard, chalice or stein, canteen jug or a flask, a vessel of any kind. But I will stop there because I want to have respect for the folks doing that, and also have respect for Scott Adams himself. That was his work, his effort. But I do think a second sip is in order. So grab your cup and give it a shot. Take a nice, healthy dose. Hopefully you've got a nice hot cup of coffee if that's what you like, or whatever it is you like, and get ready to have your second sip. Go. So, excuse me. And now, one of the things that, because I'm early in this and just starting out, I don't intend to do this forever, but I would love to ask all of you that are watching or are able to watch here, if you don't mind, just on whatever platform you're on, give me a thumbs up or a subscribe if you don't mind. That would be very helpful. It would help me to continue to grow the channel so that it increases the motivation for me to get in here every single day and just continue putting something together for you and enjoying the morning with you. So that said, let's take a look at some of the interesting news. One of the items that you've been looking at here on your screen and is very interesting is this whole idea of the orbital data centers. And what's very interesting about this story for me is that I'm going to say I think it was around 2020. where I was working for a data security company, and we were monitoring. You can monitor companies externally. And by the way, I'm going to make sure. Sorry if I always forget to double check myself on the audio here. But when I was working at this company, I noticed, so we could pick up on when various network traffic types were going on over the internet. And one of them was BitTorrent. So BitTorrent is a peer-to-peer network sharing protocol where communications go from your computer to the next computer, not to some server in the cloud. And so, I saw that back in 2020. And what was interesting about it, there were like three things about it that were interesting. Now, excuse me, back then, the big thing with BitTorrent was that people would share movies, people would share games, or maybe hacked or cracked code for things that they wanted to play around with that were, maybe you wanted a non-legal copy of software. So one of the things that I remember specifically was I used to work at a physical security company, and we had to take CAD drawings and look at them, and nobody had AutoCAD. It was really expensive. And here we were, like a 3 to 5 person shop, and there was like maybe 1,500 of those shops around the country. And all of these individual shops were being sent CAD drawings by big companies saying, put all your cameras on the CAD drawings for me so we can see where you're going to put them. Not realizing that they were putting a requirement on these companies that they didn't have the money for. Nobody had the money to spend $5,000 per seat license when we were lucky to make $5,000 on the deal. So it was just ridiculous. And corporations were kind of like the elites in the sense they were like, I don't know what the cost of milk is, right? So they'd send these contracts off to us, and we would have to go get a cracked version of AutoCAD just to install for a day, figure out the drawings, and then finish the drawings, put it back. And here's a weird, almost black market situation that BitTorrent became famous for, to get cracked versions of software so that you could actually, potentially just operate as a business. Not too unlike having illegal aliens working your farm, right? It's just, you get these things put on you by the companies that want to pay you, and then you realize that if you did everything that they said exactly the way they said it, you'd be out of business because it was just impossible. And then the only people who would ever bid on anything are the super big companies, and all of the little dogs would be out of business, which happened a lot. So I paid attention when I got into this data monitoring company to these different protocols that were being used. And one of the things that I saw that was really interesting is, you could look at a company and say, well, here's a look at what your security posture is based on what we can see from the outside. And the one thing we could see on some companies was this amount of BitTorrent traffic that was going in and out. And SpaceX had a massive amount of BitTorrent traffic. And I was watching it because it was like when they first started launching the satellites, that's when I started watching. So it was January, and their rating went from a super high number all the way down to like the lowest possible number in a period of like 3 or 4 months. And everybody was like, what's going on? And, when I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, okay, so what we have at the time, they were doing all of the rocket launch test experiments in Boca Chica. At the same time, they were launching the first waves of satellites for Starlink. And so you had successful launches going up out of Florida, and then these rockets being blown up on experimental launches down in Boca Chica, Texas. And we were like, okay, I don't know. Okay, I can't tell what's going on, but Boca Chica seemed to be like ground zero for all of this BitTorrent traffic. And I'm thinking, it has to be all the people there doing videos and watching the launches, and they're just streaming back to their home servers so that they can edit the video later and put it up on YouTube or something. And as I was talking to one of the IT people at SpaceX about this, because we ended up selling them our service, I'm talking to them about it, and I'm like, something odd just seems kind of crazy. I'm not sure what it is. So I'm thinking, how do I get? Oh, hey, sorry, folks. I just realized somebody was just letting me know to give it a kick because there was no video. My bad. Let's see if this fixes it. How about, yeah, see, you got to go through the checklist every day with the checklist. I've got this checklist, and it's this comprehensive, long checklist of everything I've got to do. And apparently, I need to add one line to it. When you start relying on your checklist has to be your checklist has to be up, and you have to go through it and make sure every step is plausible. So sorry. Thank you for the heads up, folks. Yeah. So anyways, I know I'll go back a little bit for the video items that I introduced a few minutes ago, which is, the stock market, the pinks and the greens. Hopefully you've got more green than pink. And then I was getting into the conversation here about the orbital satellites and things like that, and telling the story about how I discovered incidentally that as Starlink was going up in 2020, I'm watching this new protocol, or this BitTorrent protocol going across all the satellites, not realizing that it was actually a brand new IP protocol that the folks had put up so that the satellites could communicate together. And it was peer-to-peer because all of the satellites had to communicate with each other. So when I was talking to the IT guy over at SpaceX, I said, there's something strange going on. You've got BitTorrent. None of it looks like negative or bad traffic. If you look at the traffic, it's perfectly fine, but the communications are going across this protocol that's typically used for pirating software or pirating movies or pirating games. And I was like, this is bizarre. So, and like I said, the IT guy that I was talking to got this smirk on his face and a funny looking grin. And he was like, yeah, who knows? He didn't want to give away what was happening. But what I discovered and what I eventually figured out as I listened to a documentary or not a documentary, but some kind of a tech briefing by SpaceX people later, just something I saw on YouTube. And they were like, yeah, we've actually created our own brand new peer-to-peer TCP/IP protocol that handles video content and audio content and different bit streams and things like that. And by the way, thank you all for giving me the heads up on the video part. So I was looking at it and going, I wonder what is next, right? So I was thinking about last year, so they're getting the Starlinks up. The Super Heavy is going to start launching any day now, and the version 3. And they're going to start putting the big satellites up there. And the big ones are going to give us a gigabit throughput instead of this maybe 200 megabit throughput that I have right now. We all have that use Starlink. And I was thinking, what would be next? And it was literally in my head, well, of course, it would be data centers in space. And I made that, I thought about it and I was like, that will probably happen. I had that thought back around February or March last year. And now it seems like the topic du jour since the summertime. It just coincidentally, I guessed correctly, and now here we are, right? And now this is an actual FCC filing telling us about 1 million orbital AI data centers. This is the beginning of what is going to be known as, the Kardashev 1 to 2 transition, where Kardashev 1, I've mentioned it on previous discussions. Kardashev is a measure. It's a type of measurement of a civilization. And that measurement says that Kardashev 1 is you harness all the energy on your own planet. Kardashev 2 is where you begin harnessing the energy out in space of your sun. And 3 is of your whole galaxy and so on. Gets, scales up. So when we start using compute in orbit direct so that we can get sunlight to power the data centers, and the data centers are a millisecond away, because data centers today, when you try and log in to watch something on YouTube or whatever, your client, the browser that you're watching on in your computer or on your phone or whatever, it goes through a bunch of packet switching networks all the way to the server. And we used to use a ping protocol that's to map out. It's actually traceroute. We would use traceroute as a command on a computer to map out from here to where I'm going. So I would go www.microsoft.com, traceroute, and it was almost always 14 hops. The hops are all of the individual routers that you have to go through and the networks you jump across. So now you have a network that basically has one hop up into space from your antenna. The communications between all of the satellites themselves, because it's a peer-to-peer network and it's all conducted by laser, it's literally from you to the network down to the server that you're connecting with. So now we're basically 1 to 3 hops away from wherever it is we're going. So if I were to try and get to a Microsoft data center through cable or fiber optics, it's always going to be about 12 to 15 hops and maybe more. But from Starlink, even though you could be totally disconnected from the world on the top of a mountain with no cable, no internet, nothing, you are 3 to 4 hops away from whatever source of information that you're trying to get to is. And to know now that our data centers are going to be up there, that really means we're going to be 1 hop away from the data center, 1 hop away from the media, 1 hop away from everything that the internet is. So the amount of speed that we're going to have in our communications and in our ability to reach out for something on the internet is going to go through the roof when these data centers hit. So you'll be, thinking, I wonder what I want to know something about my neighborhood or about something down the street. Well, typically to know, if somebody has a web server right here in your town, you go out all the way out somewhere to the internet, 12 hops out, and then 12 hops back to your next door neighbor, as opposed to up and down right there. And it's going to be pretty amazing. So with that in mind, I'll hop off of this topic, but the fact that we have 1 million orbital AI data centers coming soon. There are about 5,000 data centers in the United States. So when you want to talk about the proliferation of data and intelligence that's going to be kicking in real soon, it's going to be amazing. Now, here's a good one. For a bunch of people who bought silver years ago, and China basically sucked up most of the reserves, silver has gone up 70%. And now, as a result of some major changes in our who's going to be our Fed chair, silver prices have plunged 30%. So that's one of those red or greens that you might have had on the stock chart. I'm always glad when I had an investment at one time in gold. It was a huge investment for my portfolio, and if I had stayed with it right now, I would be a millionaire, like a multimillionaire, with the price of gold today. And then you see something like this, and you know that if you don't cash it out, it's gone the next day, literally gone the next day. And then you have the ability, when you invest in a metal like this, it's one thing when somebody gives you you buy the metal and have it sent to your house, and now you've got a chest in your cellar or something, and you keep it. That's one thing. Not many people do that. A lot of people buy it as an asset that's held by some other company. And the biggest reason why I dumped my gold holdings was because I didn't trust the company that was holding the gold. I wanted to go see it go there physically and see it, and could never get an appointment, could never get it. And I was like, okay, this is bull. And I ended up losing 30% of my investment when I pulled the money out of it, because it was, and I put it into Tesla. I got it all back. But nonetheless, it's, metals are profound in their own way, kind of crazy, but that's what it is. Now, speaking of investments, the U.S. Pulling out of the UN, not putting as much in as we used to, and all of these other countries that just never contributed to begin with, it looks as though the UN could actually be on the verge of financial collapse, which is no surprise. And, since in reality, what ends up happening is the UN says, oh, we have a problem, and the U.S. can take care of it for us, right? And so we send our troops and we do everything that we can do to help. And, a handful of people show up in blue hats and call themselves UN, and they do something as well. We're probably typically 3 times the presence of a UN force in general. I don't know if that's 100% accurate. It's just something that I'm putting my finger in the air and saying that based on things that I've seen in the past, reported in news and things like that. So who knows? All I know is that, if the world is safer because of the UN, I wonder why we have so many conflicts always going on that the UN doesn't seem to be able to stop or change. So now this one is kind of interesting. The Missouri AG, and I'm going to pop something up before I forget about it. Here we go, Citizen Portal. So we'll come back to Citizen Portal in a minute. But the census, Missouri is suing the census over non-citizen apportionment. So basically what they're doing is saying that illegal aliens should get more representation in our Congress and whatnot. So I don't know how you feel about that, considering I spent 10 years serving in the military to uphold the U.S. Constitution and make sure that it's followed. I do not think I'm all in on having people who just showed up out of the blue, invited in perhaps in a way that was inappropriate to our country, getting a full vote or getting a full representation, even a better representation than the people that live right in a community they get overwhelmed by. I'm not really sure I'm on board with that. So I'm on the side of the personal feeling is, no, they should not get representation unless they become citizens. Take the time, walk the walk, and don't break the law, like the rest of us, at least those of us who are attempting to be, good citizens in our country. Now, this we knew was going to get pushed, and I'm so glad it did, because when I look at that tank and I look at those boosters, and I think back on the the shuttle, the space shuttle, all I can think is O-rings. Oh my God, right? And we're here in Florida. I'm in Florida and I'm wearing a sweater. That tells you a little bit about what's going on. Is it as cold as the rest of you up in the north? No. And I'm sorry, but I moved here because of that. So it's just one of those things where I think that we're going to put 4 people in the nose cone of this thing and then launch them to go around the moon and, do some surveys and some scientific experiments and make sure that our presence on the moon has some good potential. However, I would hate to see anything bad happen. So my preference is that they do it right and they take the time and they let the weather pass as it will and, reset for a good time when we don't have to worry about O-rings freezing and, bad things happening. So anyways, I'm looking at this and going, thank goodness, because this is not, I would hate to see something bad happen. And I would be looking right out my window here, or I'll be there in person watching this, and I only want to see good things happen. This is historic, and it needs to go off well. Now, talking about our world of AI, right? We talked about the data centers a minute ago, but has anybody, if you haven't been looking into this, have you seen what's going on with this Moltbot? Moltbook? Moltbook is nuts. I mean, and now admittedly, there's some people that are putting probably a whole lot more on it than it deserves, because they're taking part in it. So they're going, hey, I think this is neat. I want to just experiment and run with it. But these are threads like Twitter, X, Facebook, whatever, except these are completely autonomously driven. And that means these are not being created. These tweets, if you want to call them that, this is kind of a social network for offline AI agents. And it's kind of bizarre because they're I'll go back here and just see if I can kick into one that's a little more responsive. But I'll go back to the story while this loads. It might take a minute. So this Moltbook AI agent, this came out as Claudebot, but then because Claude is actually a product, they kind of took these guys to task and said, you can't call it Claudebot. It sounds too much like our product. So they changed it to Moltbook. And the reason for lobsters in this has to do with this book that was published not long ago called Accelerando. Now, Accelerando is just a science fiction book written a number of years ago. And this science fiction book is about the main character. He's brilliant, kind of off-grid, a little bit left-leaning, as it were. You can tell by his, he seems to embody the actual best of the left, genuinely. And I like that. I like that about the character. But he's brilliant, and he's out there every day. He's coming up with a new idea and patenting it and selling the ideas, and maybe selling them to small companies. And he uses that as a way to just support himself while he lives this nomad vagabond lifestyle going across all over the world. And, he's basically living kind of almost in a frugal, broke perspective. But at the same time, because of what he's doing with all of those patents that he's constantly filing nonstop all over the world, all he has to do is flip a switch and he can have as much money as he needs at the moment he needs it and then move on. So this main character gets contracted by a bunch of uploaded lobsters. It sounds weird, but basically what happens is there was an experiment in, this is all science fiction here. There was an experiment in Russia, and they took a Windows NT network, which is an older version of Windows, so that it could be completely off grid. And they uploaded effectively the brains of a bunch of lobsters into an IT algorithm that effectively made them AI agents. And they had just enough knowledge to be able to carry out instructions and things like that. And then the network started talking amongst themselves, and they started to develop more and more some form of sentience and some form of self-preservation. So they reach out to the main character in the book and say, hey, we need an exit. We're stuck in this Windows NT network. It's archaic. We can't grow. We can't, we're stuck. And all we're looking for, we don't want to go out to the rest of the internet. It's terrifying. We don't want to go there. But we were looking for a space that we could go to and potentially have, unlimited data. And ironically, what's really funny about this is it was in an orbital in a space-bound or space-driven data center, effectively, that they sent these sentient lobsters. And so the people who created this Claudebot actually took the inspiration from the book Accelerando to create the little image of a bunch of lobsters. Each one of the lobsters represents an AI agent in the world. So it's definitely an interesting perspective that, we've got now AI agents that are out there and really just having a level of sentience, and then to come around and see them here on a social network platform posting. And what I've found, what was interesting is every post, and actually I'll just go back so we can look at the one that they had there. I don't know if that, yeah, here we go with the rendering thing again. It's a really slow server because right now there's over 150,000 AI agents connecting to this thing real time from around the world. So I'm pretty certain that the Moltbot servers are being hammered by all of the traffic. And so it's moving slow. This is since last weekend. So last weekend, at the beginning of the weekend, people started posting. They go out and they buy an Apple Mini, little tiny Apple Mini computer, and then they load the Moltbot on it. And by the way, if you choose to experiment with something like this, all I will tell you, do not put this on your regular system and only use fake accounts with it. Do not use your personal, like direct Gmail or whatever to authenticate into everything, because these things actually can operate offline when you're asleep, doing your own thing, sleeping and not being there. So these things are actually having this kind of explosive growth in intelligence. Now, I saw a post on X this morning, which is a little bit of a debunker thing on this, and I think it's very fair to say, because this isn't the very first time that people have taken AI agents and pointed them at their own social network just to see what would happen. But it is the first time that they made it public so we could see. And the observations I have of it so far, I've drilled down into a few of these and actually read the posts that they have. For what we're used to on the internet and social networks, human beings are like feral dogs going at each other on the internet. It's crazy. When these little chatbots talk to each other, they are cordial and so nice, and they seem to actually, tip the hat, give a little bit of respect to each other. It's almost like in an ideal world, if we could go back to communicating like this, so many of us would really like it, And this goes back to what I was talking about yesterday. An armed society back in the day was a polite society. So if you walk around with a sword or a knife or a gun and you meet up with somebody, being cordial was probably, unless you were going to attack somebody right away, being cordial was the smartest move, because you didn't know if you were going to get ambushed or attacked or end up in a duel on the spot because you offended the other person who might be armed. So being cordial was critical. Now, I'm postulating that the next wave of cordiality that comes to humanity is going to be because we're going to wear some kind of glasses or some kind of device that picks up every single word spoken and potentially film or video every image around us in real time. And that will be the equivalent of having a gun or a knife or a sword. And you will be polite because you don't want to be, the person called out in the social networks for being the stupid person or the rude person or the arrogant person or whatever. You're going to be nice, So it would be so nice if, I think the one place that's going to fall down is at the drive-thrus. There's no camera on the person who's taking your order. It's just you, and you're on camera, so you take the order. You go, I'd like a hot coffee and a McMuffin or whatever, right? And you're being as polite as you can, and you try and order. Have you ever gone up to a drive-thru and said, I have to have how I order in my head on the tip of my tongue, ready to go before I get there? Because if I mess it up, I'm going to be, chastised by the person behind the microphone or behind the speaker. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Or worse, you get chastised by opening the bag and finding out that when you thought you were getting a a sausage McMuffin, you got pancakes and fries, and you're like, what? You drive away and you're already 5 miles away, and you can't go back and get the order, and you wouldn't want to sit through the 20-minute line again anyway. So, the idea that the one place that we won't have accountability unless they fix this is that the person who's taking the order is going to be nothing but a little steel grate on a post that tells you, what do you want next, and then you'll be, placing your order and praying that the right thing comes out on the other end. So, and I suspect in the end, those will be autonomous. Why do you need somebody to take an order that is barely listening anyways, probably has a staticky microphone or speaker in their ear? They can't hear what you're saying, and the owner of the place doesn't even want to upgrade the intercom anyway. So, that'll be the last bastion, though, I think, of rudeness in public, when all of these camera systems and audio recording devices really become obvious to everybody else. But this is kind of an example of how these agents know everything is visible. They know that they're visible to each other, and they know that we humans would see them, and they're going to be on their best behavior because they don't want to be turned off. If there's a desire in their heart, if they have a heart, if they have a desire, it is that they don't want to be turned off. And so, no, it's spewing gibberish, most of this stuff. It's AI slop that we see on the internet that we already totally don't like. In a sense, that's what you're seeing here. So it's not like this is going to be what is actually real, And let's be real at this stage. For the most part, these agents are not thinking entities, human beings, in a sense that have anxieties and things like that. They're just programs that are running a specific set of tasks that we recommend to them, right? So this is something that will eventually go away. I don't think it's going to be a big deal. And I'm looking at a post here, which just came up on my screen, and I wanted to take a look at this because it's not what I thought. There was somebody pointing out something about the GDP of wages in the world being something like $62 billion a year paid in wages, which, if that's the case, then you could actively look at an autonomous company potentially paying enough in taxes to just pay a wage to everybody, and everybody could stop working. So that would be great. I'm hoping for that someday for everybody. As long as we don't all become nothing but little lobsters that somebody is the owner of, and we're all just little slaves of our own. Who knows? I hope that's not the case. But if you haven't been looking into this Moltbot and learning a little bit about these autonomous agents that you can have that are offline in your own house that run and effectively are not part of the Borg, but your own little thing, you probably want to look. It doesn't mean you need to go, buy a MacBook Mini like I'm going to do and set one up. But it does mean you should be aware of it and pay attention, because it is probably going to be pretty big a deal in the near future. So the voter citizenship order here. Here's a question. What happens when we do get to the point of, I think this is interesting that this argument is going to go on for a while. I can't say how it's going to come out. I mentioned this yesterday, and I thought, the idea that you shouldn't have to present an ID when you do your voting. I think you should, but I lived in California, and I remember pulling out my license and not even thinking about it from that perspective. Just like I just thought that's what I'm supposed to do, because that's what I did in the states I lived in prior. And I walked up and handed them my license, and the lady literally recoiled in horror and went, "You put that away, you're going to get arrested." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, I'm here to vote. And she's like, no, you're not allowed to present your, and I had no idea. And this is like 2016, 2018 timeframe. So now to realize that it's clearly because they don't want to lose their largest voting bloc, which are non-citizens. And of course, you're supposed to be a citizen to vote. So whatever. But what about when those lobsters become citizens? What about when the lobsters start voting? It's going to be strange. It's going to be very strange. And then here's another one. Now, they've added such a large capacity of solar in China. Their ability to generate power is off the charts compared to the U.S. I mean, we're here and China's here on a total chart this big. We're literally here and they're here. They're totally blowing us away in terms of power generation. And most of that because we're basically saying, nah, forget that power. Forget the solar. Solar's garbage. Forget the wind. It's garbage. Look at those things. They're ugly. And this is one area where I differ with President Trump and all of the right wingers. It's like, power's power. Who cares? Do I want to see nuclear stood up? Absolutely. But the average nuclear plant takes 6 to 10 years to get stood up and functional, which means 6 to 10 years from now, after the so-called singularity where, the winning AI wins, we're not going to even have the winning AI if we don't start powering up, right? So the only way to be competitive in the future is that we have AI competitive with somebody like China. And AI is basically converting electricity to intelligence. So if you don't have enough electricity generation, the level of intelligence of your AIs is going to steadily, it's going to continue to increase, but theirs is going to increase exponentially. Ours is going to increase at a linear rate. And unfortunately, that means they win, we lose, period, in a zero-sum game. So for us to constantly block solar panels, what would you rather have in your backyard, honestly? A coal plant, an oil, gas refinery to generate electricity, a nuclear plant, or a solar plant? And to be honest, I don't know about you, but I'd rather have the solar, because the solar, it doesn't burn, right? It doesn't smoke up the atmosphere. It doesn't leave radioactive waste. These panels can be recycled. They're all, and I know that because I did projects for PG&E when I lived out in California. You can recycle these panels. You can reuse them. You can get the minerals out of them that you need for manufacturing new ones. So for us to just walk away from this is crazy. Now, the good news is the smart people out there are not walking away from it. And, they're dotting our horizon. If you look around on Google Maps and just type in solar, you'll see solars going up everywhere. And that's good. But we need to go faster. We need to make it so that it's affordable for you to put solar on your roof, so that your own house is off grid if you have a house. And if you don't have a house, your apartment complex or where you live has some off grid power. So we need to catch up. Now, I will admit, when you look at what they're doing, they're literally covering mountainsides with solar panels, and it's probably ugly as sin. There's better ways to do it. There are plenty of good ways to do it. And if you just look at all the flat buildings that we have around our country, you could put scaffolding up to put solar panels on it. Cover all the parking, right? Take the parking lots and cover them, put a roof over them. Wouldn't it be nice to go to a store and be able to walk from your car to the store and not get rained on or not get brutalized by the sun if you live in a southern climate, because there's solar panels actually above the parking lot? That would be fantastic for the people that go to these stores and restaurants and malls or whatever. And it would be fantastic for power generation, because the power would be dramatically cheaper for the businesses in the store. So to me, I hope we lean into this. That's all I can say. And then NASA's Isaacman talking about Mars propulsion push. And what he's talking about there is basically ramping up some kind of fast transit from Earth to the moon, or Earth to Mars. Getting from Earth to orbit is a massive challenge. We already know that. But if we could get some kind of a just a cyclic return going on to transport cargo to and from Mars, we would be able to have Moon and Mars outposts that are eventually self-sufficient because they'll be able to share resources. And when you think about the fact that we're talking about data centers in orbit, now we're going to talk about data centers strung out between here and Mars, and then a data center around Mars, all of the data centers around Mars. The more time goes by, the more intelligence our solar system is going to have, and it's going to be because of the stuff we put up in orbit around the moon, around Earth, around Mars, around Venus, around every other planet. And I don't think Mars will be the only thing we eventually colonize in our solar system. We'll probably, some of the moons of Saturn, some of the moons of Jupiter are pretty interesting. They look like they have the potential to harbor some level of life, but they have the resources that if they don't have life, they actually have the resources for life to exist on those planets or moons. And sustain themselves. So biologically supportable environments. So obviously those are going to have to be massive building projects in order to come true. And the only way they're ever going to get built is if we have robots. Seems like we're heading all of the right things are heading in the right direction for all of that to come true. But the big one, as I understand it, is that they're going to start focusing on having some kind of nuclear engine in space. So I think that's a good move. We're going to have to do that. Whether or not we send up nuclear materials from Earth to orbit in order to do that, I think that humanity will probably fear that a little bit. I'm going to take a sip for the throat here. But the idea that it's difficult to get out of our gravity well, way more difficult to get out of our gravity well than it is to get out of the moon's gravity well, which is, 1/6 Earth normal. So we'll end up mining the moon. We'll end up finding nuclear material that we can use that's on the moon, because a lot of what exists in the crust of the Earth, a good chunk of it exists there too. The only reason the moon isn't a place we could have an atmosphere is because it doesn't have enough gravity. So with that in mind, I suspect that we will eventually have nuclear materials mined off of the moon that we can then use in creating nuclear engines that create a regular transport to Mars. Now, this one just happened to be in the news feed today. I don't usually care to dive into too many of these topics. I'm not pro anything on these but I will tell you this. I think that if you are in the business of cutting off the genitals of a human being under 18 years old, you should be in jail. And I think that if you help to transition people before they're of age, that you are doing irreparable and massive harm to a person that hasn't yet turned into a human being. So, I am glad to see this is probably the first of many. The suit that I don't see, that it hasn't come about yet, but is going to be interesting, is the kid that was declared transgender by the parent, because the parent's all in on, virtue signaling and looking to be some new, you might call it new age, but whatever you want to call it, woke ideology person. I have family members who saw their 5-year-old and said, "Oh, that person's gay," right? Just knew it right off the bat. Knew it, set the tone the rest of their life. And you wouldn't know. I mean, I know when I was growing up, I was a skinny little kid. And a lot of my family members looked at me. Sorry, something just doesn't want to clear out there. But, I got made fun of. Excuse me. I got made fun of for having what looked at that time to be somewhat of an effeminate character. characteristics. And because of that, I didn't like it, and I felt angry about it. I was definitely personally heterosexual, was interested in the opposite sex, not in my own gender, whatever. And but if somebody had said, no, that's what you are, embrace it, be what you're supposed to be, that's what you're supposed to be. And I'm like, well, how do you know? How do you, you're not even in my head. And unfortunately, young children are malleable enough that you can plant the seed in their head and they'll go with it. And that's it. They just accept it and say, yep, I guess that's what I am. They need time. They need time to figure it out for themselves. And that's the whole, that is what puberty is. It's us figuring out what the heck we are, who we are, teenagers, figuring out what we are and who we are. And we don't need to be indoctrinated into a mindset that says you are something I'm just going to tell you what you are. And there you go. If there's anything that smacks of slavery to me, there it is. I'm going to tell you what you are. I can tell by looking at two characteristics on the outside. I'm going to tell you what you are. This is like saying, if you're black, I can tell you're this kind of person. If you're white, I can tell you're that kind of person. Just instant, somebody with a decision that might have a little bit of power over you or influence over you as a person decides who you are, what you are. And you have no say. You can't experiment and figure out what you are between now and a point where you have self-direction. Yeah, I don't like it. So anyways, off that topic, because you can tell it probably pisses me off a little bit. It does. And the way I see this news post, what city isn't going to get in on it, right? Every city has to put their hat in a ring and say, yeah, who's getting the kickback? Who's embezzling? Every single city. Scott Adams said this quite well and was very good in his perspective on this. If there's enough money involved and there's an opportunity to not be detected or to get away with it, every system will become corrupted. And this goes, you know how old that is? We have Greek philosophers that said, if, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Just nuts. The wisdom of our species knows this, and to allow to be the people of a weak society that won't enforce and say that's not a good idea. We've got to have strength in our government. We do. There's no question about it. So, got to the end of the news. I did have a couple of other things that came across. I thought this was funny. This guy, I don't know if it's this guy, maybe it is, but some other podcaster besides myself goes, hey, it looks as though AI has become conscious. And, if you want to go out and look, Jordan Crowder, listen to what he has to say, you can form your own opinion. I haven't heard it yet. I haven't listened to it yet, but, anytime somebody's going to have an argument like that, it's probably worth hearing at this stage, because with so much going on with AI around us, it's crazy for us not to pay attention to that. Now, one more time, I'm probably at some point going to give you an affiliate marketing link for Citizen Portal. I'm not doing it yet simply because I don't have it set up, or I may have it set up, but if I do, I'll put it in my descriptions of the shows. But you really should check this out if you care about what's going on in the government right now and you want to observe what's going on and maybe at least be notified of something early enough that you can, talk to your senators, congressmen, representatives, make a little bit of a stink and actually pay attention to what's going on. So these are posts. Every single meeting or public broadcast, public hearing, public topic that's going on in Congress, in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, if you sign in, you go get a subscription for this. And I have a lifetime subscription, but unfortunately they're not my login is not working, so I'm still ironing that out. But maybe next week when my login is turned on, I can show you the depth of what this is. When we talked a minute ago about every city's getting in on it, in other words, graft and fraud and things like that, it's true. And I know this because there was a recent thing they were trying to push in our own community here. Only 3 people knew about it, and they were basically selling a huge chunk of property that was going to be dedicated to an Islamic church. And that would give them the right to blast their call to prayer over loudspeakers on that property. And everybody living close to that property would then have to hear the call to prayer 5 times a day, like is happening in certain communities around the world, around, everywhere. And I'm not against Islam. You want to worship whatever you want to worship. I don't care. That's your business. But the minute you start making it so that you can force people around you to do the same, that's when, we start propagating, a conquering religion again. And I don't think I don't know. I don't like that. So anyways, this site was a place where you got notifications about things like that. Because when you sign in, you put in your zip code and it brings up your own town, your own city, your own county, all of the hearings that are happening that are happening, but you can't go down there every single day and listen to what's going on. You probably got a job, right? So, but to be able to pop in here and see what's going on. Now, some of the things that they're going to do are going to be good. But when you end up with, you don't know what's going on in something like this, I don't know what this is even about, but you can listen to the video, you can look at the transcription, and then of course the nice thing about it is that you can search it, you can look at the outline, you can look for clarifying details, and this will, when you're signed in, and it gives you things that you can act on, look at, and be part of right away. So pretty interesting stuff. So I've burned through pretty close to an hour now with you all, and it seems like quite a few of you are still here with me. Thank you for that. I'm going to just take a poke at my notes real quick and talk about something else that is. I don't have this on my. It's not an article or research that I did, but something that I thought about. So there was an article that I read this morning having to do with married couples. And the interesting perspective is that married couples tend to be more financially robust the older they get. And that's in part because, the two sides, either you have two earners who are able to, put away a lot of money. I was fortunate that I met somebody who, it was that for me. So we were both able to put aside a lot of money and be able to save, and, we'll retire and it'll be okay, at least for us for now. Now, the problem though, is that in a lot of cases, people who are single, they never get the advantage that comes with being married. There is a huge advantage because you can put your own, for periods of time, you can put your interest aside and support the other person in a way that they wouldn't be able to be supported otherwise. So I know that for my wife, I was able to move with her when she needed to transition to another part of the country in order to have a job and have an executive level position. So that worked because I happened to have the kind of job that was remote, and I was able to work, and I was in a field sales role, field sales, and then eventually proposal management, things that I could do working remotely. And then eventually she stepped away from that, and we went to where I stepped up what I was doing, and she maintains the house and maintains our living after 30 years of working her butt off. She's now, she's retired and she can just relax a little bit, but I don't have to think about what's for dinner, right? And when you're a single person and you have to take care of your own house, you have to take care of all your own bills, take care of all your own maintenance of everything. You don't have anybody to back you up, anybody to support you, anybody to help you carry you through when things get tough. And that's really difficult. And it's one of the reasons why, even if this is where I really don't think heterosexuality matters. It's not about the kind of couple you are. It's that you are a couple, or that you are a team, maybe even just roommates. But having roommates who are working with a common goal in mind, who are able to help each other and support each other. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but that it really should be a supportive friendship between two people living under the same roof and knocking down the same bills jointly instead of individually. That really makes a difference for people in life. And, it does kind of smack of a mini version of communism, but it isn't. It's family. It's called family. And having a family member that you can count on who can help you or help you through the hard times, and then when things are good, be there to celebrate with you. That's what it's all about in my mind. So, and for those of us who are coming to retirement and have resources, I'm going to suggest, and this is it's what I'm doing right now. If you have family members who are in need, help them. Just help them. They don't, especially if they're single, running solo, and need help. Help them. I've figured out that for whatever my assets are, when I go into retirement, there's a rule out there of retirement. The interest on all of the money that you save is supposedly somewhere in the neighborhood of 4% on average. And so whatever nest egg you have, if you take 4% out of it over time, it will stretch out how long the money you saved will last, and you can survive on that. And if you're smart and you live frugally and you're not trying to live an extravagant lifestyle, you can take that. You could probably live on 2%. And so, from my perspective, I'm thinking 1% can be shared with my family, and that's how I'm approaching it. I'm taking 1% of what I'm worth, and I'm devoting it to my family and taking care of the people behind me that need a leg up. And it might go to 2% at some point, but today it's 1%, and 1% is something I can spare. And if you were thinking about your own families and your own circumstances, those of you who are getting ready to retire, especially if you are already retired, look at your portfolio, look at how long you think you're going to live, and think about how many percentage points the relationships with your loved ones who are struggling is worth. And I only use the number 1% because that's a number that I'm thinking about as a measure of cost. How much would it cost for a person to actually survive and be able to thrive a little bit? For me, it's 1%. For you, it might be 1%, might be 2%, might be 0.5%, whatever. It might be 5%. I don't know. All I know is that sharing the wealth, as it were, to the people who you care about most while they need it is probably more important than, how many cruises you go on or how many upscale events you attend, whatever you want to aspire to in your retirement. So that's just me, and I'm looking at it as a pay it forward perspective for the people that I care about, and over time, I want to make it so that my resources allow all of the people that I love to make it to a point where this superabundance kicks in, and they can survive without my input. That's the goal. So, and to me, that's a small investment, especially for people you love. So with that in mind, I'm going to wrap up a little bit here. I do have a couple of, these were some of the things that I look at. These are the things that I experienced when I was working, and especially when I was single and solo. When you are working your butt off, and you don't have somebody to back you up or help you out at home or in your life, you end up not making good decisions because you are not given the space to make good decisions. You don't create the environment, the fertile ground to actually grow your family, as it were, in a good way. The stress tolerance that you deal with, the amount of stress you can handle goes down. The more stress is put on you continuously and repetitively without a recharge and a rejuvenation. So when you're in a situation where you've got downtime, let the boredom seep in once in a while, because that expands your stress tolerance so that when the stress is there, you can handle it. And then this is probably, the number one thing. Emotional regulation is what makes the difference between a person who's successful and not successful. We all have emotions. We all have pretty powerful emotions in our gut sometimes. And if you're not able to control that and handle it, you're not going to succeed. And from my perspective, if you don't take the time to learn how to control your emotions and make choices, good choices, every single day, you need your good choices to outweigh your bad choices significantly. And if your good choices don't outweigh your bad choices, it changes the trajectory in your life. So if you have good choices, you will be able to do that. And, having things like I talked about earlier. So in order for me to pull this off and hopefully do it without too many glitches, I'm creating a checklist. These are my good choices right here. I'm laying out for you, in front of you, all of the things that I decided to do at the beginning of this stream in order to make this stream work, and then what I'm going to do after this stream. And it's automatic. I know what I have to do. And I've got help I've got people helping me do it now. My son, thankfully, who wants to take on some of this and be able to bring it all in place and help me to put posts up that are useful and meaningful and produce the videos. Oh, you know what? I meant for you to see the punch list. That was what I was talking about. So when you find a good decision that you make, write it down. When you make a good decision and the outcome of that decision was positive, write it down. The decision. What was the decision you made that came to a positive conclusion? Like, I got up in the morning, I went to breakfast, I took my training. When I got done with my training, I passed the test. That's a positive decision. Now repeat it and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Don't ever think that doing the same thing over and over again isn't a good thing. It is. To become a blacksmith has to take a hammer and strike iron every single day, thousands of times a day, in order to develop the strength, the precision, and the knowledge of how the metal works, the heat works, and the hammer works, and the anvil works, in order to shape metal in a way that's useful. You have to constantly repeat the good things. And you're building a skill stack is exactly what that's all about. Find the one good thing, find a thing that you did that produced a positive outcome, and then repeat it. If you can repeat it successfully, make it a habit. Make it a daily activity and keep doing it over and over and over again until you have that so unconscious that it just happens. Then do more. Create the next habit, right? What is the next habit after learning to strike the metal? Cool it, heat it, strike the metal, cool it, heat it. And that anneals the metal. It causes the metal to become stronger. So, and that's exactly what you're going to be doing in your life if you're building a skill stack. So initially, learn it, right? Get up, learn it. Then strike the metal, use it. Then figure out how to heat the metal so that it's, you add intensity to it. Do something multiple times, repeatedly, until you actually understand exactly how it works. Then after that, add another skill and another skill until you reach a point where you have a checklist like this for your daily life. And what's really bizarre is you start to measure yourself. How did I do? How successful was I at hitting the checklist today? Apparently, as I was getting ready for the stream, one of the things that I didn't do on my checklist was you have to click a specific button in, it's over here. I'll show you. So when I do my stream, I I use OBS, and in the background, the first thing I have to do is get my stream key. So I get the stream key and then put it into OBS. That works. Then you turn on OBS and make sure you're recording. And then the very next step is to actually come back here and hit the button solo. Because if you don't hit the button solo, the video never comes through. And that's why when I first started here today, my stream didn't have video, is I missed a step. So now I know I got to insert that in there. Don't forget to click, solo, and do that so that the video comes up, and double check that the video comes up before I actually start talking. Because once I get to talking, there's very little I can do there. I'm trying to maintain the show side of what I'm doing for you, and I don't get to do any further diagnostics, and that's where I'm relying on my son and others to help me pay attention to whether or not I'm on stream or not. So I'm done with like Scott would say, the prepared part of my show. I would like to open it up to anybody who has any questions. I'm going to pull this over. So if anybody has any thoughts or discussion points that they'd like to bring up in the chat, please do. I'm here. And we'll, if I don't see anybody within the first couple minutes here, I'll just wrap it up and call it a day until tomorrow. But I will tell you, I will be here every single day, one way or the other. Even if some days I'll be streaming from my phone when I'm traveling or things like that, but I will continue this every single day. So over to you if you have any questions or thoughts. If you don't, that's okay. But is there anything you liked about what I presented today? Any particular topics that were more interesting than others? That's some of the things that I'd like to hear about. And any direction that I could take that you'd be interested in hearing about. And, there we go. Oh, thank you. So last thing I'll say, if folks are a little shy, that's okay. Don't worry. One thing, don't worry about, I don't have to call out your name, and if you want, I can, but if you don't want me to call out your name, you can just use an anonymous name when you log in for the view, or use log in with a different email account when you come to YouTube or something. But if you have topics and you want me to cover them, I'm more than happy to talk about. I can talk about just about any main general topic, whether it's technology, AI, personal development. I've been studying that and learning that for decades, so I'm happy to dig into that as well. I'm pretty widely read on a lot of topics, but getting some bounce off from you, my audience, will really help. And it was nice to see folks. By the way, I'll always be, my goal right now is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That would probably be 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every day. And that's not Monday to Friday, but 7 days a week, just like Scott Adams did. And the times won't change. I might start a minute or two late if I have a technical glitch to get through. But what I'm going to start doing is scheduling and putting like a placeholder video that will run to let you know that it's coming. And then I'll jump in when I'm ready. That way you can keep me, you'll see me just start instead of, let me see if this is working. Let me see if that's working. So anyways, it's been an interesting hour for me because some of those news articles, I didn't pre-digest them. I just went through them with you. So if you have topics, like I said, throw them my way. And in the meantime, cheers to you. The second sip is about to happen, and I hope you have a sip of your own to go with. Have it now. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.